The gilded cage, the silk dress felt like chains against Celeste. Nakamura's skin as she stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the opulent dressing room. The emerald fabric hugged her petite frame perfectly, accentuating curves she'd never thought to showcase before tonight. Her reflection showed a stranger, someone sophisticated and alluring. Nothing like the art student who spent her days sketching in coffee shops and volunteering at the children's hospital. "You look absolutely divine, darling," her Aunt Helena purred from behind her, adjusting the delicate gold chain around Celeste's neck. Helena Blackwood had always been the family's success story. The woman who'd escaped their modest upbringing to marry into wealth and influence. When Celeste's parents died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving her with crushing medical bills for her grandmother's cancer treatment, Helena had appeared like a guardian angel. "I still don't understand exactly what this modeling job entails," Celeste whispered, her voice barely audible above the classical music floating through the luxurious suite. The contract Helena had shown her seemed legitimate enough: exclusive fashion photography for high-end clients. It's the kind of money that would cover grandmother Akiko's experimental treatment in Switzerland. Helena's smile never wavered. Cold flickered in her steel blue eyes. "Trust me, sweetheart. You're exactly what my clients are looking for: fresh, educated, beautiful. Tonight is just a private viewing. Think of it as an audition. You'll mingle with potential photographers and designers." The elevator descended smoothly to the penthouse. The level of what Helena had called the Golden Peacock, supposedly an exclusive modeling agency. But as the doors opened, Celeste's stomach plummeted. The scene before her wasn't a photography studio or fashion show. Men in expensive suits sat in leather armchairs, whiskey glasses in hand, their eyes predatory and calculating. Young women moved between them like dolls, their smiles brittle and their eyes hollow. "Welcome to the main event," Victoria Cross announced, her voice carrying across the dimly lit room. The club manager's red hair was pulled back severely, and her black dress hugged her angular frame like armor. "Gentlemen, tonight we have something special, our newest addition to the Golden Peacock collection." Celeste's blood turned to ice as Victoria gestured toward her. This wasn't modeling. This was something far more sinister. She turned to Helena, desperate for an explanation, but her aunt's expression had transformed into something she'd never seen before: cold satisfaction mixed with greed. "You signed a contract, darling," Helena whispered, her manicured nails digging into Celeste's arm. "Your grandmother's treatment has already begun. The money has been transferred. You wouldn't want to disappoint these generous gentlemen, would you?" As the bidding began, numbers flying through the air like bullets, Celeste felt her world crumbling. This was the price of trust, the cost of desperation. She closed her eyes, trying to transport herself back to her grandmother's garden, where cherry blossoms fell like snow and the world still made sense. Then a voice cut through the chaos deep, authoritative and strangely comforting. "That's enough." A tall figure emerged from the shadows near the bar, his presence immediately commanding the room's attention. Marcus Stone moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His dark suit impeccably tailored, his steel-gray eyes focused entirely on Celeste. "The lady isn't for sale," he announced quietly, but his words carried the weight of absolute authority. "Not tonight, not ever." The mysterious savior Marcus Stone's penthouse office overlooked the glittering expanse of Manhattan, but his attention was fixed entirely on the young woman sitting across from his mahogany desk. 3 days had passed since he'd extracted Celeste from the Golden Peacock, and she still flinched whenever someone entered the room too quickly. "You don't trust me," Marcus observed, setting down his coffee cup. His assistant, James Whitfield, had briefed him on Celeste's background. Our student, orphaned, caring for a sick grandmother. The perfect target for Helena Blackwood's predatory schemes. "Should I?" Celeste's voice was stronger now, though her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "You paid off my supposed contract, gave me this suite, and now you're offering me a job. People don't do that without wanting something in return." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Behind the fear, he saw intelligence and determination, qualities that reminded him painfully of someone else. "My sister Rebecca was 22 when she disappeared," he said quietly. "Beautiful, trusting, desperate to help our sick father. She answered an advertisement for hostess work at exclusive events. Celeste's breath caught. The Golden Peacock? Among others, Helena Blackwood runs a network that spans 3 states. They target vulnerable young women, exploit their desperation, and disappear them into a system that's almost impossible to escape. Marcus's jaw tightened. I've been hunting her operation for 18 months. When I saw you on that stage, I saw Rebecca. The intercom buzzed and James's voice filled the room. Mr. Stone, Detective Martinez is here. A woman in her 40s entered, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the room before settling on Celeste. Detective Rosa Martinez had been working trafficking cases for over a decade, and it showed in the weary determination etched into her features. Ms. Nakamura, she said, extending her hand, I need to ask you some questions about your experience at the Golden Peacock. Your testimony could help us shut down the entire operation. Celeste shrank back into her chair. I can't. My grandmother's treatment. If Helena finds out I'm talking to police, your grandmother is safe, Marcus interrupted. I've moved her to a private facility under an assumed name. The treatment is fully funded, no strings attached. Why? Celeste's voice broke. Why are you helping me? Marcus stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the cityscape. 'Cause 18 months ago, no one helped Rebecca. She's still out there somewhere if she's... He couldn't finish the sentence. This is bigger than just Helena. We're talking about judges, police officials, businessmen, people who should be protecting victims instead of enabling predators. Detective Martinez opened her file. We have surveillance footage from the Golden Peacock, financial records showing payments to city officials and testimony from 3 other victims. But we need someone credible, someone with Helena's direct involvement documented. Celeste closed her eyes, and Marcus saw her making a choice that would define the rest of her life. When she opened them again, the fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by something fiercer age. Helena told me I was signing a modeling contract, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. She showed me fake portfolios, arranged for professional photos. I have recordings on my phone from when I questioned the legitimacy of the setup. Recordings? Detective Martinez leaned forward. I was studying journalism before I switched to art. Old habits. For the first time since Marcus had met her, Celeste smiled, a small, sharp expression that transformed her entire face. Helena always was careless around family. As Detective Martinez and Celeste began planning their strategy, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since Rebecca's disappearance. Hope. But he also felt the stirring of something else as he watched. Celeste transformed from victim to survivor right before his eyes. The hunt for Helena Blackwood was about to begin. In earnest, building an empire. 3 years later, the boardroom at Nakamura Enterprises buzzed with nervous energy as Celeste reviewed the acquisition proposals spread across the polished conference table. At 26, she commanded respect in a way that still surprised her, her black hair now cut in a sharp bob. Her designer suit a far cry from the trembling girl in the emerald dress. The numbers don't add up, Felix, she said calmly, her dark eyes fixed on the man across from her. Felix Romano was everything she'd learned to recognize and despise, titled manipulative, accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and charm. Come now, Ms. Nakamura. Felix smiled, the expression never reaching his cold blue eyes. Surely a young woman like yourself can see the wisdom in accepting my offer. Nakamura Enterprises would benefit enormously from Romano Industries' backing. Diana Chen, Celeste's business partner and closest friend, bristled visibly. What Mr. Romano means is that he wants to buy out our non-profit division and gut our victim advocacy programs. Celeste had built Nakamura Enterprises from nothing. Starting with the settlement money from the successful prosecution of Helena Blackwood 3 years ago, what began as a small non-profit helping trafficking survivors had evolved into a luxury fashion empire. With every purchase funding rescue operations and victim rehabilitation programs worldwide, the fashion industry is surprisingly profitable. When you refuse to exploit your workers, Celeste observed, her voice carrying just a hint of steel. Our survivor-made jewelry line alone generated $12 million in revenue last year. Felix's mask slipped slightly. You're being emotional about business, sweetheart. This bleeding heart approach isn't sustainable long term. The term sweetheart hung in the air like a challenge. Celeste felt Diana tense beside her, but she maintained her composure. She'd learned to weaponize the underestimation of men like Felix Romano. Mr. Romano, she said softly, I'm going to tell you a story. 3 years ago, a young woman signed a contract she thought would save her grandmother's life. She was trafficked, sold, and nearly destroyed by people who saw her as merchandise. Celeste's smile was razor-sharp. That woman was me. Felix's expression shifted from condescension to calculation, then to something approaching fear as the implications sank in. He'd done his research on Nakamura Enterprises, but clearly not thoroughly enough. The difference between you and me, Felix, is that I know exactly what it's like to be treated as a commodity. Every decision I make, every dollar I earn, every business I build, it's all in service of ensuring that never happens to anyone else. Celeste stood gracefully, her heels clicking against the marble floor. So no, I won't be selling to Romano Industries. But I will be acquiring your trafficking-adjacent modeling agencies in Prague and Bangkok. You can't be serious, Felix sputtered. Diana slid a thick folder across the table. Financial records, witness statements, connections to offshore accounts. Turns out some of those modeling contracts your subsidiaries offer are remarkably similar to the ones Helena Blackwood used to use. The face went ashen as he rifled through the documents. This is... Where did you get these? Marcus Stone's investigative team is very thorough, Celeste replied. We've been building a case against your operations for 6 months. You can either sell those subsidiaries to us at fair market value and accept oversight of your hiring practices, or you can explain to federal investigators why 17 of your models have disappeared without a trace. The man who had entered the room with such arrogance now looked like a cornered animal. You think you're so clever, don't you? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections. Influence had, Celeste corrected gently. Past tense. Amazing how quickly those connections evaporate when faced with evidence of human trafficking.
Ow.
She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Felix, if you ever call me sweetheart again, I'll buy Romano Industries outright and turn your headquarters into a shelter for trafficking survivors. Consider it a public service. As the boardroom door closed behind them, Diana laughed despite herself. I can't believe you threatened to buy his entire company. Who said I was threatening? Celeste's smile was luminous and terrifying in equal measure. The acquisition papers are already drawn up. The tables turned, the photograph arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning, sliding across Celeste's desk like a serpent emerging from shadows. Her blood turned to ice as she stared at her own face, Shunger, terrified, wearing that emerald dress. From 3 years ago. On the back, Helena's familiar handwriting. How much is your reputation worth? She's supposed to be in federal prison, Diana said, her voice tight with anger as she stared at the image. Early release for good behavior, apparently. Celeste's tone was deceptively calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she set the photograph aside. She got out last week. The phone rang, and Celeste's assistant announced that Helena Blackwood was on the line. Celeste closed her eyes, steel herself, then accepted the call. Hello, darling. Helena's voice was exactly as Celeste remembered, silk wrapped around poisoned steel. You've done remarkably well for yourself, though I must say, I'm hurt you didn't invite me to celebrate your success. What do you want, Helena? Now, is that any way to greet your dear aunt? The woman who gave you your first big break? Lena's laugh was musical and terrifying. I want what's mine, Celeste. 50% of Nakamura Enterprises. After all, none of this would exist without my initial investment in your career.
Oh.
Celeste felt the familiar clawing sensation of panic, but forced herself to breathe steadily. And if I refuse? Oh, sweetheart, you know exactly what happens if you refuse. Those photographs find their way to every major news outlet in the country. Trafficking victim or willing participant makes for such compelling headlines. Your precious empire built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. How do you think your investors will react to that? The line went dead, leaving Celeste staring at the phone with a mixture of rage and something that felt dangerously close to her old fear. But she wasn't the same broken girl Helena had once controlled. "Diana, get Marcus on the phone," she said quietly, in James Whitfield. "Then contact Judge Patricia Wells' office. I want to know why Helena was released early." 6 hours later, Celeste sat in Marcus's office as his team laid out their findings. FBI agent David Torres, a compact man with intelligent eyes, spread documents across the conference table with grim satisfaction. "Judge Wells has been taking payments from Helena's network for over 5 years, he announced. "Not just for reduced sentences for dismissing cases, suppressing evidence, even expunging records. We have bank statements, encrypted communications, the whole conspiracy." Marcus leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. "Helena's not just targeting you, Celeste. She's rebuilding her operation, using her remaining connections in the judicial system to protect her new trafficking network." "How many judges?" Celeste asked. "At least 12 across 3 states. Plus prosecutors, police officials, and immigration officers." Agent Torres' jaw tightened. "We're talking about a corruption network that reaches from street-level cops to federal appellate courts." Celeste stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. For 3 years she'd built her life and her business on the assumption that justice had been served, that Helena and her network had been destroyed. She'd been naive. "What's our move?" she asked quietly. "We could arrest Helena immediately," Agent Torres suggested. "Her extortion attempt against you is a federal crime." "No." Celeste turned back to face the room, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made him sit back in his chair. "That's not enough. She's counting on me being afraid, on me making the same mistakes I made 3 years ago." Diana frowned. "What are you thinking?" Celeste's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm thinking it's time to flip the script. Helena wants to play games with photographs and blackmail. Fine. But this time, I'm not a terrified 23-year-old. With no resources and no allies, she picked up the photograph from her desk, studying her younger self's frightened face. "I'm going to give Helena exactly what she wants: a meeting, a negotiation, a chance to destroy me." Her voice grew quieter, more dangerous. "What she doesn't know is that she's walking into a trap 3 years in the making." Marcus stood slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're going to take down the entire network." "All of them," Celeste confirmed. "The judges, the officials, every single person who profits from destroying innocent lives," Helena thought. She was blackmailing a victim. She carefully placed the photograph in her safe, her movements precise and deliberate. She has no idea she just declared war on a queen. The headlines screamed across every major news outlet. "Billionaire's secret past sparks corruption investigation." From trafficking victim to tech mogul, the Celeste Nakamura story. Federal raids target judicial trafficking network. Celeste stood in her penthouse apartment, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold and rose. Beside her, Marcus held 2 cups of coffee, his presence steady and reassuring after the whirlwind of the past month. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. She considered the question as she accepted the warm mug, inhaling the rich aroma. The past 4 weeks had been a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice. Helena's attempted blackmail had triggered an investigation that ultimately exposed over 24 corrupt officials across 7 states. The evidence Celeste's team had gathered: wire recordings, financial documents, victim testimonies had been overwhelming. "None," she said finally. "Though I never expected the media response to be so ... supportive." The public revelation of her past had indeed sparked a media frenzy, but not the destruction Helena had anticipated. Instead, Celeste had become a symbol of survival and transformation. Trafficking survivors around the world had begun sharing their own stories, creating a movement that transcended borders and languages. "The Senate hearing tomorrow will be the final piece," Marcus said, settling his arm around her shoulders. They'd become partners in every sense: business, personal, and in their shared mission to dismantle human trafficking networks. Celeste nodded, thinking of the testimony she would deliver before Congress, advocating for stronger anti-trafficking legislation and judicial oversight. The broken girl in the emerald dress felt like someone from another lifetime. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Diana entered carrying a small velvet box and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. It arrived this morning, Diana announced, opening the box to reveal an extraordinary piece of jewelry. The crown was delicate but striking white, gold shaped into flowing branches, set with diamonds that had been donated by trafficking survivors from around the world. Each stone told a story of survival, transformation, and hope. From the survivors in the Bangkok shelter you funded, Diana explained. They wanted you to have something beautiful made from their pain. Celeste lifted the crown with trembling fingers. It was lighter than air, but carried the weight of hundreds of stories, women and girls who had reclaimed their lives and their power. There's something else, Marcus said, producing a small leather folder. The Romano Industries acquisition is complete. Felix signed over his trafficking-connected subsidiaries to the Nakamura Foundation this morning in Helena. Celeste asked, though she already knew the answer. 25 years, no possibility of parole. Judge Wells got 15 years, and the other officials are facing similar sentences. Marcus's smile was grim, but satisfied. The network you exposed has been completely dismantled. That afternoon, Celeste stood before a room full of survivors' women. She had helped escape girls who had found new lives through her programs. Families reunited through her foundation's work. The crown rested lightly on her head, not as a symbol of monarchy, but of transformation. 3 years ago, I thought my story was over, she told them, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. I thought I had been reduced to a commodity, that my value was determined by the highest bidder. She paused, looking out at faces that reflected her own journey. Pain transformed into strength. Victimhood alchemized into power. But we are not what was done to us. We are what we choose to become. The crown caught the light as she moved, sending rainbow patterns across the walls like stained glass. We are not survivors despite our past. We are queens because of how we reclaimed our futures. The standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes, but Celeste barely heard it. Her attention was fixed on a familiar figure in the back, Ron, elderly Japanese woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. Grandmother Akiko, now cancer-free and radiant with pride, stood with tears streaming down her face. After the event, as the crowds dispersed and the media crews packed up their equipment, Celeste found herself alone with Marcus in the empty auditorium. The crown sat on the table beside her speech notes, no longer needed, but somehow still significant.
What?
Now, Marcus asked, you've built an empire, destroyed a trafficking network, and become the face of survivor advocacy worldwide. What does the Queen do for an encore? Celeste laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the empty space. Now we get married, expand the foundation to 15 more countries, probably by a few more companies that need ethical restructuring. She picked up the crown, studying its intricate metalwork. Ooh, and I want to adopt that teenage girl. From the Seattle shelter, the one who reminds you of Rebecca. Marcus's breath caught. You think she'd want that? I think every girl deserves someone who sees her as more than her worst day. Celeste stood, crown in hand, and walked to where Marcus waited. Besides, queens need heirs. And I can't think of a better legacy than raising a daughter who knows she's worth more than anyone could ever pay. As they left the auditorium together, Celeste placed the crown carefully in its case. Tomorrow she would testify before Congress. Next month she would walk down the aisle. And in the years to come she would continue building bridges from pain to power. But tonight, she was simply a woman who had chosen to transform her deepest wound into her greatest strength. The girl in the emerald dress was gone forever, replaced by a queen who wore her scars like a crown and her survival like a badge of honor. And in a world that too often treated women as commodities, Celeste Nakamura had proven that sometimes the best revenge is living magnificently.